Welcome in, everyone, to this deep dive with
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Yeah, we're going to be looking at his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness.
It's a classic.
It is a classic.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be pulling in some related Buddhist sutras to see what kind of practical techniques and fascinating insights we can uncover for living a more present and peaceful life.
You know, one thing that really struck me when I was reading through The Miracle of Mindfulness is that Nhat Hanh doesn't treat mindfulness as some kind of esoteric practice,
Right.
It's something that's woven into the fabric of everyday life.
Yeah, it's not just for, monks sitting on a mountaintop.
Exactly.
He brings it down to earth with, things like washing the dishes.
Yeah, he uses that very example. He says you can wash the dishes just to get them clean, or you can wash the dishes to wash the dishes.
Right.
What do you think he means by that?
I think he means by that you're fully engaged in the experience.
Mm-hmm.
You're not rushing through it just to get to the end result.
Exactly.
You find a sense of presence and purpose in what you're doing.
And it's not just about chores either. He talks about
Right.
how easily we get lost in thoughts about the future or the past and miss out on what's happening right now in the present moment.
Yeah.
He tells this wonderful story about sharing a tangerine with his friend Jim Forrest, and Jim was so busy talking about his plans that he barely even tasted the fruit.
That's funny.
And Nhat Hanh had to gently remind him to come back to the present moment and savor the experience of eating this tangerine.
I feel like I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm so caught up in my to-do list or what's coming up next that I forget to appreciate what's happening right now.
We all do it. It's part of being human. It's that monkey mind, that's constantly chattering away.
Yeah.
But mindfulness is about recognizing when our attention drifts away and gently guiding it back to the present moment.
Right. It's not necessarily about like clearing your mind completely.
Exactly.
It's more about noticing when your attention wanders and bringing it back.
And Nhat Hanh offers us a really powerful tool for doing that. Our breath. He calls it a bridge between the body and mind.
I love that analogy.
So, when we focus on our breath, we can bring ourselves back to the present moment and start to calm the mind.
So how do we actually use our breath to cultivate mindfulness?
Well, Nhat Hanh suggests a couple of techniques. One is just following the breath, paying close attention to the sensations of each inhale and each exhale. Another technique is counting the breaths. So you mentally note each cycle of breath from 1 to 10. These might sound really simple, but they can be incredibly effective in calming the mind and cultivating a sense of serenity. What's really fascinating is that Nhat Hanh even credits breath work with helping him heal from personal challenges.
Really?
He says
He actually has a quote about that, doesn't he?
He does. He says, our breath is such a fragile piece of thread, but once we know how to use it, it can become a wondrous tool to help us surmount situations which would otherwise seem hopeless.
That's powerful.
Yeah. There's a real sense of resilience in that statement. And this leads us to another key theme in Nhat Hanh's teachings, overcoming suffering.
Okay.
And here's where the Buddhist sutras that we mentioned come into play.
Oh.
They offer some really profound insights into the nature of suffering and the path to liberation.
So one of the concepts that comes up in the sutras is the 5 aggregates.
Yes.
Which are bodily forms, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness.
Yes.
Now, I have to admit, this is a little bit new to me. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. Think of the 5 aggregates as like the building blocks of our experience.
Okay.
The sutras suggest that contemplating these aggregates can help us to see how everything is interconnected, which is a key step in understanding and overcoming suffering.
So it's not just about understanding ourselves as individuals,
Right.
but it's about understanding how we fit into a larger web of existence.
Exactly. And Nhat Hanh uses a really great example. He talks about the Bodhisattva Kwan the Am, who is a figure of compassion in Buddhism. And Kwan the Am found liberation through this very understanding of interconnectedness.
So Kuan Yin saw that suffering arises from the illusion of separateness.
Yes, from this belief that we are fundamentally isolated beings.
So when we recognize our interconnectedness, we can start to break free from those self-centered patterns that often lead to suffering.
Precisely. It's about shifting from a me versus the world perspective to one of unity and interdependence.
Right.
We're all in this together.
This reminds me of another story that Thich Nhat Hanh tells about the almond tree in his front yard.
Oh, yes.
He was translating orphan applications, and he had this profound experience of what he calls non-discrimination mind.
Yes.
Where he saw himself and the child as one.
Yes.
without any separation or judgment.
It's a beautiful example of how mindfulness can lead to a shift in perspective.
Right.
And he goes on to talk about the three natures of reality, which are imagination, interdependence, and ultimate perfection.
Okay.
And he uses this almond tree to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
You know, the almond tree in its fullness represents reality. But how many of us truly see it that way?
That's a good question. It's like we're so caught up in our own heads,
Exactly.
our own judgments and biases, that we miss the richness of what's right in front of us.
And Nhat Hanh is encouraging us to cultivate a mind that's open and receptive to the present moment,
Right.
free from those filters.
Like seeing the world with fresh eyes.
Like a child experiencing things for the first time.
Yeah. That's a beautiful invitation.
It is.
It makes me think about how I can bring that sense of wonder and appreciation into my own life.
And that's a perfect segue into our next point.
You know, it's one thing to talk about cultivating a sense of wonder and presence like we were just talking about.
Right.
But it's another thing to actually put it into practice,
It is.
especially when we're faced with challenging situations.
Absolutely. And that's where Nhat Hanh's emphasis on compassion and action comes in.
Right.
He doesn't just offer mindfulness as a way to, cultivate inner peace. He shows us how it can transform our relationships and our actions in the world.
Yeah. And there's this incredible story about the angry man that he encountered at the St. Louis church.
Oh, yes.
The man just lashed out at Nhat Hanh, accused him of not being in Vietnam helping his people.
Yes. It's a really powerful story.
It is. And I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been to be on the receiving end of that.
It must have been really challenging. But you know what's so remarkable is that Nhat Hanh's response wasn't to meet anger with anger.
Right.
He met that man's rage with compassion.
He did.
And he explained that, he was there in the U.S. to represent the Vietnamese people and show what humans are capable of at their worst.
It's just such a remarkable example of responding with understanding
Yes.
rather than reacting defensively.
It is.
But how can we cultivate that kind of equanimity,
Right.
especially when someone is directing such negativity towards us?
It's definitely not easy. And Nhat Hanh acknowledges that. He emphasizes that, cultivating compassion is an ongoing practice. It's not something that we perfect overnight. It takes time and effort. He suggests that we start by simply noticing our anger when it arises,
Okay.
observing it with curiosity rather than judgment.
So instead of suppressing it or letting it take over,
Exactly.
we create space to understand it.
You got it.
What would that look like in practice?
Well, it could be as simple as asking yourself, what sensations am I feeling in my body right now?
Right.
What thoughts are running through my mind? And by bringing awareness to those physical and mental sensations, you create this pause
Okay.
between the stimulus and your reaction. And that pause allows you to choose a more skillful response.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
But Nhat Hanh also points out that, our anger often stems from our own pain and fear.
Yes,
So that adds another layer to this, doesn't it?
it does. It certainly does. Recognizing that someone else's anger might be rooted in their own suffering can help us to cultivate compassion, not just for them,
Right.
but also for ourselves.
Right. We've all experienced hurt and fear. And those emotions can manifest in different ways.
They do. And it's a powerful reminder that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Our actions and reactions impact each other. It's not just about me, it's about us.
Right. It makes me think about how cultivating compassion can create this ripple effect.
He can.
Not just within ourselves, but in our interactions with others.
Absolutely. It's not about condoning harmful behavior,
Right.
but rather understanding that it often arises from a place of pain. And by choosing compassion, we can help to break the cycle of negativity
Yeah.
and contribute to a more harmonious environment for everyone.
This brings to mind another interesting point that Nhat Hanh makes. He says that compassion isn't just about dealing with difficult emotions like anger.
Yes.
It's also about cultivating joy and peace in everyday life.
Exactly. And one way he suggests we do that is by bringing mindfulness to simple pleasures. He actually uses the example of drinking tea.
Okay.
He describes it as a a sacred act that we should savor fully.
So instead of just gulping down our tea while we're rushing to the next thing,
Exactly.
we really pay attention to the experience.
You notice the aroma, the warmth of the cup in your hands, the subtle flavors as the tea touches your tongue.
Right.
By slowing down and being fully present, you transform this ordinary act into a moment of peace and gratitude. And you can apply the same principle to so many other areas of your life.
Right. It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot
Yes.
and choosing to truly experience what's happening in that moment.
Exactly.
Whether it's, enjoying a meal, listening to music, taking a walk in nature.
Yes.
Those moments become so much richer.
Devoting a good 30 to 45 minutes to the experience.
Okay.
It's a wonderful act of self-care, allowing yourself to really soak in the sensations of warmth, the feeling of the water on your skin, the scent of the soak.
That sounds incredibly luxurious.
It does.
But in a world that's constantly pushing us to go faster and do more, it's a powerful reminder to slow down and prioritize our well-being.
Absolutely. And speaking of slowing down and paying attention, Nhat Hanh also emphasizes the importance of spending time in nature.
Right.
He shares this beautiful story about a monk whose garden is always lush and vibrant.
Okay.
Because he tends to it with such mindfulness and love.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds us that nature can be an incredible source of healing and renewal.
It makes you want to just step outside and really look at the trees.
Yes.
Listen to the birds sing.
Exact.
Feel the ground beneath your feet.
There's a sense of grounding and connection that comes from immersing ourselves in the natural world.
Yeah.
Along with cultivating mindfulness, Nhat Hanh also talks about developing concentration.
Okay.
He explains that it's like a muscle that we can strengthen through practice.
And one of the techniques he suggests for developing concentration is counting the breath, right?
Yes. It's a simple but surprisingly effective technique. As you breathe in, you mentally note 1. As you breathe out, you note 1 again. And you continue counting each cycle of breath up to 10, then you start over. And the key is to gently guide your attention back to the breath whenever you notice your mind wandering.
Right. So it's not about forcing our minds to be blank.
Exactly.
But rather about developing the ability to notice when our thoughts are pulling us away.
Yes.
And gently redirecting our attention.
You got it.
Okay.
And Nhat Hanh explains that developing concentration is crucial for cultivating deeper insights into the nature of reality.
Yep.
When our minds are calm and focused,
Yep.
we can see things more clearly, free from the distractions and distortions of our usual thought patterns.
So it's like clearing away the mental clutter.
It is.
To reveal the true nature of things.
Exactly. And those insights in turn can lead to greater wisdom, compassion, and peace.
That makes sense.
Now, we've been talking a lot about mindfulness and concentration.
Right.
But there's another important aspect of Nhat Hanh's teachings that we haven't explored yet.
Okay.
And that's the concept of interbeing.
Interbeing. Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it.
Okay, well, it's a term that Nhat Hanh coined to describe the interconnected nature of reality.
Okay.
It's the understanding that everything is interconnected and interdependent. We can't exist in isolation.
So it's not just that our actions affect others,
Right.
but that we're fundamentally woven together in the fabric of existence.
Precisely. He explained that even something as simple as a table we eat at
Right.
is not just a table. It's also the forest where the wood grew, the carpenter who crafted it, the sun and rain that nourished the trees. Everything is interconnected from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy.
Wow. That's a beautiful way to think about it. It shifts our perspective from one of separation and isolation
Yes,
to one of unity and belonging.
you got it.
But how does this concept of interbeing play out in our daily lives?
Well, it has profound implications for how we live. When we recognize our interconnectedness,
Right.
we're more likely to act with compassion and care. Not just for ourselves,
Right.
but for others and for the planet.
Right.
Because harming one part of the web inevitably harms the whole.
So it becomes less about me
Yes,
and more about we. It
exactly.
expands our circle of concern beyond our own individual needs and desires.
It does. And Nhat Hanh emphasizes that interbeing isn't just a philosophical concept.
Right.
It's a reality that we can experience directly through mindfulness.
Okay. I feel that.
Well, let's say you're eating an apple.
Go ahead.
By bringing your full attention to that experience, you can start to see the interconnectedness at play. You might notice the tree that bore the apple, the sun that ripened it, the farmer who picked it, the truck driver who transported it to the store.
Right. It's like tracing the threads of connection back to their source.
It is. And suddenly that apple becomes so much more than just a piece of fruit. It becomes a symbol of interconnectedness, a reminder that we are part of something much larger than ourselves.
And that realization can lead to a deep sense of gratitude and reverence for life.
It can.
And that reverence, in turn, can inspire us to live in a way that honors the interconnectedness of all beings.
Absolutely.
It all comes full circle, doesn't it?
It does.
Mindfulness, compassion, inner being.
Yes.
They're all interwoven threads in the tapestry of a meaningful life.
Beautifully said. And perhaps one of the most powerful ways to embody this principle of interbeing is through the practice of compassion.
So it's more than just feeling sorry for someone.
It is. It is. Nhat Hanh explains that compassion is about understanding another person's suffering
Okay.
and having a genuine desire to help alleviate it.
Hmm.
And this understanding arises naturally when we recognize that their suffering is also our suffering.
Okay.
Because we are all interconnected.
So it's not about separating ourselves from their pain.
Right.
But rather recognizing that their pain is also our pain.
Exactly. And when we see it that way, it motivates us to act with kindness and generosity.
Right.
Not out of a sense of duty,
Right.
but out of a genuine desire to help.
It's important to remember that Nhat Hanh doesn't see compassion as a sign of weakness.
It doesn't.
He actually views it as a sign of strength and courage.
That's right. Because it takes courage to open our hearts to the suffering of others.
Right.
And strength to act in ways that alleviate that suffering.
So he offers practical suggestions for how we can cultivate compassion in our daily lives.
He does. One of the simplest is to practice mindful listening.
Mindful listening, what's that?
So instead of just waiting for our turn to speak,
Right.
we really tune in to what the other person is saying,
Okay.
both their words and their emotions. We put aside our own thoughts and agendas
Right.
and truly listen with our full attention.
Right.
We try to understand their perspective and empathize with their feelings.
Right.
And that kind of deep listening can be incredibly healing,
Yeah.
both for the person speaking and for ourselves.
It's a gift we can give to others and to ourselves.
It is. And along with mindful listening, Nhat Hanh also encourages us to cultivate compassion through small acts of kindness.
Like what?
It could be something as simple as holding a door open for someone offering a helping hand, or just smiling at a stranger.
Right.
Those small acts can have a ripple effect,
Yeah.
spreading joy and positivity throughout our communities.
It reminds me of that saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Yes.
We never know what someone else is going through.
We don't.
But a simple act of kindness can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And don't forget about cultivating compassion for ourselves.
Right.
You know, we often judge ourselves harshly,
We do.
focusing on our perceived flaws and shortcomings.
Yeah.
And Nhat Hanh reminds us that we are all worthy of love and compassion,
Just as we are.
just as we are.
So it's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a dear friend.
Exactly. By practicing self-compassion, we create a more supportive and nurturing inner environment.
Right. And this can help us to be more resilient in the face of challenges and to live with greater peace and joy.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From mindfulness in everyday life to cultivating compassion and understanding inner being.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But there's one more story from the Miracle of Mindfulness that I think beautifully illustrates the essence of Nhat Hanh's teachings.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay. So it's a story about an emperor
Yeah.
who was obsessed with finding the right time to do things, the right people to work with,
Oh.
and the right thing to do at all times.
Okay. That sounds like a recipe for anxiety.
It does. He seeks advice from wise men and scholars,
Okay.
but none of their answers satisfy him.
Mm.
So he disguises himself as a peasant,
Okay.
and he travels to a mountain hermitage seeking guidance from a hermit.
Sounds like a classic hero's journey.
It does. So the hermit listens patiently to the emperor's questions,
Okay.
but instead of answering them directly,
Right.
he invites the emperor to help him dig in the garden. Oh, interesting. So the emperor is being called to action.
He is. And as they are working, a wounded man stumbles into the garden.
Oh, wow.
So now the emperor is faced with this unexpected situation,
He is.
and he has to decide what to do.
Right.
So the emperor and the hermit, they tend to care to the man's wounds,
Okay.
and they care for him throughout the night.
So the emperor is being called to act in the present moment?
Yes, rather than getting caught up in these abstract questions.
That is.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
When the man wakes up,
Right.
he reveals that he was the emperor's sworn enemy,
Oh, wow.
and that he was intending to kill him on his way back from the hermitage.
What a twist.
It is. So the emperor is completely taken aback by this.
Yeah.
But overwhelmed with gratitude for the emperor's compassion,
Yeah.
the man vows to serve him for the rest of his life.
Wow.
The emperor is astonished by this turn of events,
He is.
and he returns to the hermit to ask him once again about the 3 questions.
Okay.
I bet he has a different perspective now.
I bet he does.
So the hermit smiles and says, "Your questions have already been answered."
I love that.
The emperor's confused, of course,
Yeah.
but the hermit explains that the most important time was when he was digging in the garden. The most important person was the hermit,
Right.
and the most important pursuit was helping him.
Okay.
And the same was true when the wounded man arrived.
Yes.
The most important time was when he was caring for the wounded man. The most important person was the wounded man.
Right.
And the most important pursuit was tending to his wounds.
So the answers were in the actions, not in the abstract pondering.
Exactly. The hermit was basically revealing this profound lesson that remember that there's only one important time, and that is now. The present moment is the only time over which we have dominion. The most important person is always the person you are with, who is right before you, for who knows if you will have dealings with any other person in the future. The most important pursuit is making the person standing at your side happy, for that alone is the pursuit of life.
Wow. That's beautiful.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
It's a call to presence, to connection, to compassionate action.
It's a story that stays with you.
It does.
And it reminds you that the present moment is all we truly have.
Right.
And that the most important thing we can do is to be present with the people in our lives.
Yes.
And act with kindness and compassion.
Beautiful note to end on. But I believe we have one more part to this deep dive.
We do.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. That story about the emperor and the hermit really made me realize, how easy it is to get lost in those abstract questions.
It is.
And completely miss the beauty and the opportunity of the present moment.
It's such a classic story, and it really speaks to the heart of Nhat Hanh's teachings. He offers us this path to liberation from suffering.
Right.
Reminding us that while suffering is an inevitable part of life, it doesn't have to control us.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah.
So how can we move from suffering to liberation?
Well, through mindfulness and understanding, we can transform that suffering into wisdom and compassion. Nhat Hanh often uses the analogy of a lotus flower, which grows in muddy water yet blooms with beauty and purity.
So it's like we can rise above our challenges.
Yes.
And find peace and joy even in the midst of difficulty.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about, cultivating mindfulness in everyday life, bringing awareness to things like washing the dishes or drinking a cup of tea.
Right, finding those moments of presence throughout the day.
But Nhat Hanh also emphasizes the importance of formal meditation practice.
He does.
So setting aside dedicated time to sit and be still.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Well, he describes meditation as a way of returning home to ourselves. It's a time to quiet the mind, connect with our breath, and cultivate a deeper sense of peace and stillness. And he suggests finding a specific time each day for meditation, even if it's just for a few minutes to start.
Okay. What are some of the techniques that he recommends for those of us who are new to meditation?
One of the simplest and most effective techniques is to focus on the breath. You simply notice the sensations of each inhale and each exhale, bringing your full attention to the rise and fall of your chest or your abdomen.
Now, what happens when our mind starts to wander? Which I imagine it inevitably does.
That's completely natural. The key is to simply notice when your attention has drifted away and gently guide it back to the breath.
Okay.
Don't judge yourself for having thoughts.
Right.
It's what minds do.
Yeah.
Just gently redirect your attention back to the breath.
So it's a practice in patience and self-compassion.
It is.
I like that.
And as you become more comfortable with this practice, you can start to expand your awareness to include the thoughts and feelings that arise and pass away in the mind.
Okay.
You observe these mental events without judgment, recognizing them as fleeting phenomena rather than solid, unchanging truths.
It's like watching clouds drift by in the sky.
It is. They appear, they change, and then they disappear.
Yeah.
And this practice of non-judgmental awareness is key to cultivating peace and equanimity. Okay.
It allows you to see your thoughts and feelings with more clarity and to respond to them with more skill and compassion. That makes sense. Nhat Hanh also encourages us to cultivate loving kindness and compassion in our meditation practice.
He does.
And he teaches a beautiful meditation called metta meditation.
Yes.
Which involves sending loving and compassionate thoughts to ourselves and to others.
Exactly.
How does that work?
You can start by repeating phrases to yourself like, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be safe.
Okay.
And as you repeat these phrases, you really try to feel the sentiment behind them.
Right.
Then you can start to extend those wishes to others.
Okay.
Starting with loved ones and gradually expanding to include all beings.
So it's like radiating those feelings of love and kindness outward.
Exactly. And this practice can help us to open our hearts, cultivate compassion, and connect with a deeper sense of love and interconnectedness.
But Nhat Hanh also reminds us that mindfulness and compassion aren't just about our internal experience.
Right.
They should also guide our actions in the world.
They should. He emphasizes the importance of living ethically.
Okay. So it's about aligning our actions with our values.
Precisely. He offers 5 mindfulness trainings, which serve as guidelines for living a more ethical and compassionate life.
Okay.
The first training is about respecting all forms of life and avoiding harming any living creature. The second training is about practicing generosity and sharing our resources with those in need.
Okay.
The third training is to cultivate responsible sexual behavior, respecting ourselves and others, and avoiding actions that cause harm.
Okay.
The fourth training encourages us to practice mindful speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and with the intention of creating understanding and harmony.
Okay.
And finally, the fifth training is about cultivating mindfulness in our consumption.
So that means choosing food and products that support our health and well-being.
Yes.
And that minimize harm to the environment.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices that reflect our values and our understanding of interconnectedness.
It's inspiring to see how all of these teachings, from cultivating mindfulness to practicing compassion and living ethically,
Yes.
come together to create a path to a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
It truly is. And as we come to the end of our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought from Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
He reminds us that the path of mindfulness is a journey, not a destination. It's a process of continuous learning and growth.
So it's about embracing the journey, even with all of its ups and downs.
Exactly. And it's a path that's open to all of us, regardless of our background or beliefs.
Right.
And he encourages us to be patient with ourselves, to practice diligently, and to always remember that each breath is an opportunity to return to the present moment and cultivate peace and joy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive into the world of Thich Nhat Hanh.
It's been my pleasure.
His teachings offer such a profound and practical guide for navigating the complexities of life.
They do.
With more awareness, compassion, and peace.
They do.
I hope everyone listening will take these insights to heart.
Me too.
And continue to explore the path of mindfulness in their own lives.
It's a wonderful journey.
It is. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.